We're going to be back in Revelation 18 again. I watched Sister Darlene do Sunday school last week. She did a good job.
She did.
And it's amazing to me, you know, we've been talking about the end times for a long time. And she comes in here and teaches it out of Timothy. So that's what the Holy Spirit's teaching, telling the churches now. Well, I don't know how many times I get up and teach Sunday school and Brother Don will preach, not sometimes out of the same scriptures or something like that. We don't discuss that ahead of time. But that's just how the Spirit moves.
That's right.
So, back in Revelation 18, let's see. Brother Don, would you open us up here?
Father, we thank you for the many blessings. God, you've been so good to us. We're so unworthy, Lord. But Lord, we're thankful for all the blessings you send our way. We thank you for Mount Calvary, Lord, and for what you stand for. And thank you for each and every member here, Lord. God, give us a great service today. Bless Brother Dan. Give him wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And bless the reading and teaching of his word. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Sunday before last, we've been looking at Babylon, when Babylon falls. And I think we've pretty much proved, or at least we've seen a lot of things happening in our day that the Bible talks about. If you remember back, we went through a list of things that Babylon has been doing. I'm gonna read pretty quick through these scriptures. Revelation 18, starting in verse 19. And he's talking about the nations that when Babylon falls, this is what they're going to be doing, and the people too, really the whole world. And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea, by reason of her costliness, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. The merchants are going to be without a job for a while. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. How will it be thrown down? With violence. And the voice of the harpers, musicians, pipers, trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. Probably do away with rap music, and that'd be a blessing.
Yes.
I'm just picking, but
And hard rock.
talking about music, that's Babylonian music. Some of the stuff that they want, that's a band, Dr. Seuss, stuff like that. Listen to some of these rap songs sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
How filthy they are. And they know the word for it. I mean, just filthy. And they're winning awards for it.
Yep.
That's how backwards it is. God's had enough of that. There won't be no more of that heard. And no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found no more in thee. All the craftsmen, and when you talk about craftsmen, that's fine work. They're not just carpenters that are like me, you know, I can hammer together something and make it work. These are people that put together intricate, high dollar stuff. They'll still be around, but they won't be working for Babylon. Look at some of the old buildings, most of them over 100 years old. The detail that's in them, and not just board and bat houses. there's detailed trim all over it. I remember when Sherman Bailey, you remember him, he was a carpenter. He built his daughter and her husband a house out on 96. We went out there and hooked it up way back. I forget how many columns were around that house. And if you went and looked at them, it probably took him 2 days to put together one of them. It had so much detail all through the house, the trim, and craftsman. That's how a craftsman does it. He don't just put it together. He puts it together and makes it look great. But that won't be in Babylon anymore. Whatsoever crafty be shall be found anymore in thee, and the sound of a millstone shall not be heard no more at all in thee. The light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. Factories, millstones is like factories. The light of a candle, well, we've got electricity now instead of candles. Back when Babylon falls, Babylon's going to lose all this stuff that they've been selling all this time. And I'm saying that because in verse 23, and the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. Now, I thought about that. Y'all, I'm going to say something, y'all just take a chew on it. People are still going to be getting married. So, what is Revelation talking about? The voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. Could that mean Jesus and his bride? The bride and the bridegroom. When Babylon falls, we'll go back to chapter 14 and look at chapter 14 in a minute, because it's an outline of these next chapters. Babylon falls before the rapture. When Babylon falls, then the rapture. Well, chapter 18 that we're reading in now is the judgment of Babylon. So, when Babylon falls and the rapture takes place, the judgment comes on Babylon, we're not going to be here. We will see it fall. But the judgment comes after we're gone. Now, you just take that chill. We're going to look at some more stuff. Revelations is, it's like me telling you what I did yesterday. I can tell you, well, I got up and drank coffee, ate breakfast, studied a little while, came up here and practiced and went home, took a nap, got up and did something else. Well, if I go into detail, I could write 3 or 4 pages just on what we did at practice yesterday. But then you're not going to realize that all this happened in one day. I've seen entire books written, and there's just one day take place. A lot of stuff can happen in a day.
Yep.
In the book of Revelation, a lot of these things are happening at one time. It's all happening at once. And it's hard to take it all in and make it fit in my mind when this takes place, because he'll tell you one part of the story, like he gave us the outline in 14. Well, he's still talking about it in chapter 18. So you got to get the story put back together and see what's happening all at once. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee, for thy merchants were the great men of the earth. The merchants of Babylon were the great men of the earth, billionaire merchants, big companies of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. If we're coming up on the end of Babylon, Babylon's still deceiving us. You don't find this out till the judgment. Some of these things are not going to come out till Babylon's judged. So we're living in a time, what does the Bible say? What do yours say? For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Have we been deceived?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
By far.
There it is. I hate to admit that I've been fooled. And we're just now seeing some of this. So the end of Babylon is very near. I've said things that I've seen in Revelation that really don't line up with what we've been taught over the years. Way back, 30, 40 years ago, because they didn't see it. What time? What did God tell Daniel? The last book of Daniel had a dream, a vision, and he asked God, he said, what does all this mean? He was discomfited, the Bible said. Daniel said, what does all this mean? God told him, he said, shut the book up and see that, Daniel. He said, it's for the end time. He wouldn't even tell Daniel what it meant. But now it's being revealed. And all this time, Babylon, remember, Babylon is controlling the nations, the governments that control the people. It's all one big working together. But the nations have been deceived and worked, manipulated through finances. Verse 24, in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. That's not just prophets and saints, that's all. That's a wide statement.
Yeah.
And that slain is murdered. That's not just die a natural death, that's intentionally killing somebody. If we look at just one, we're just going to probably have time to look at one thing today. And I'm going to try to separate Babylon and the nations, but remember, Babylon is controlling the nations, but if we go back, Satan's controlling Babylon. So he's behind it all. He's the one manipulating the nations through finances. And I'm going to just go ahead and get to the point in case I run out of time, forget it. When Babylon falls, he can't manipulate the nations through the financial system anymore, so he'll go directly to the nations. The nations will have to band together. What does that sound like? One world government.
One world government.
He'll be controlling it. And that's when the Antichrist comes in. I just want to make that point ahead of time so you know where we're going. And then it'll come into play of, I hear people all the time talk about, well, there'll be 3.5 years of this, 3.5 years of that. Well, that don't come till the Antichrist shows. If we just look at one thing today, and let's look at the blood of prophets, blood of saints, and all that were slain upon the earth. They'll be found in Babylon when all this is revealed. There have been millions of people killed in just the last 100 to 150 years in war. Just in war. That's not counting what goes along with war, famine, pestilence, everything else goes along with it. That's just people killed in war. If we just go back, let's go back to the Civil War, 1860s. Leading up to the Civil War, there were presidents that were trying to avoid it. And some of them died in office. And their vice presidents that took over just signed off on compromises that made both sides mad. Now I'm talking about Zachary Taylor. He was a well-known general. They couldn't figure out what party he belonged to because he wouldn't join the party. A lot of people think he didn't even vote for himself. Never voted in a presidential election, yet here he is president. And he would not compromise. He wanted California and New Mexico to come into the Union as free states. He said, let them decide, Texas. If they want to come in free, let them come in free. Well, Babylon didn't want that.
That's right.
Babylon wanted to keep the,
They wanted to make that.
and the only way to do that, I got a book with presidents in it. I like to read them. I have to read some over and over and over. It said he went to some kind of outdoor event. And when he got back to the White House, he ate a bunch of fruit. And he either drank milk or water, a lot of it, and it soured on his stomach and it killed him. Zachary Taylor was a tough old dude. He was a general. He went Santa Ana, went all the way to Mexico City. How long do you think he had been eating fruit and drinking milk? A long time.
It was also rumored, I've read about him and some other books, that it was rumored that he was poisoned
Yeah.
because he wouldn't conform to what they wanted.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. His vice president came, that was at the time, they were fighting over a compromise for those states to come in, and he was going to veto it. No, he's not going to do it. If I have to, I'll send troops down there and I'll lead the troops, he said. Well, he died by eating a bunch of strawberries. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Millard Fillmore came in there, signed it, away we go. Everything's cool. No, it's not. The North is still mad and the South is still mad, and we're headed to civil war. One way Babylon controls the world is if a country gets too powerful and decides they want to get out from under Babylon, start a war.
That's what's happening right now.
We came out of the Civil War with more Americans killed. Because think about what was happening in the Civil War. We weren't fighting another country. It was Americans fighting Americans. Anybody that died on either side was American. More Americans died in the Civil War than all the rest of the wars we've ever fought put together. That's a fact. You can look it up. After the Civil War, the country's bankrupt. We've been fighting ourselves. The industries were in the North. The farming was in the South. The industries and the farming were destroyed. In Sherman's March to the Sea, he destroyed the Southern crop. Everything he came to, he burned. And you understand war. But at the same time, the Confederates were blowing up railways. The whole country destroyed itself. After the Civil War, the country was bankrupt. Abraham Lincoln made it his foremost goal after the war ended that he was not going to punish the South. He said, we're all Americans. We're going to work to rebuild this country. And about a month after the Civil War, he was shot in the back of the head. Johnson, Andrew Johnson, I believe is his name, took over after Lincoln. He was so sorry they impeached him. Went after the Southerners. The Northerners went after the Southerners. The Southerners kept coming after the Northerners. The war really kept going on. After him, Ulysses S. Grant came in and basically signed the country over to the bankers. Because we're bankrupt. They come in, offer him a deal. We'll bail you out, give you money to operate on, if you'll just sign up. What do we do when we go to buy and borrow money? We sign up. What does a country do when Babylon comes along and says, everything will be cool, you'll have plenty of money, just sign up? He signed up. Now, look some of this stuff up. It's real interesting. We rocked along there for about 30 years. The country was doing pretty good. Everything going pretty good. Woodrow Wilson gets in there. And here comes World War I. Now, think about this. Germany, one country, and they had a few allies, but basically Germany fought the whole world. How did they do that? Somebody's got to loan them some money to do that. That's the First World War. Had America not gotten involved in that war, Germany would have won it. We got involved. One of the bloodiest wars ever been fought. We didn't lose as many people. After that war, Woodrow Wilson was in debt massively. The country's in debt again. Fought another war overseas. We got to train troops. We got to build boats. We got to have all this. Go across the ocean, fight a war. Come back, we're bankrupt. What happened? Babylon come along. We'll bail you out. Sign on to the note. So he gives a little more. You ain't gonna find this in many history books, but he said after he got out of office, he had strokes. He was paralyzed when he got out. What have I done? He said, what have I done? It was in Woodrow Wilson's administration after the war that he pumped the League of Nations. He tried to force it on everybody, and nobody would go for it. A League of Nations to keep us out of war. Well, it sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? Babylon was financing Germany. Babylon financed the other side too. Now, both sides owe us Babylon. That's how it controls the nations. Am I explaining it? Is it making sense?
Oh, yeah.
20 years later, 20 years, thereabouts, a nut job gets control of Germany. I mean, complete nut job. And people are flocking to him by them, just masses of people. Watch those old rallies he had.
Yeah.
They were hooing and hawing over him like he was the Messiah. He built that country up, massive war machine, and he took over Europe, the Middle East, and was on his way through Africa when the United States got involved.
Yep.
Just 20 years after World War I. How did he do that? How did he do that? I mean, complete lunatic.
Somebody gave him some money.
That's right, Babylon did.
Yeah. It wasn't him.
You think we're being played against each other?
Oh, yeah, we are.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
He was bombing England with rockets. Didn't anybody else have that kind of technology? And he didn't come up with it. After World War II, let's just keep going. If we go back, I'm going to read one verse about the beast. And remember, the beast is the nation's government. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. Could that be Germany? World War I, they were defeated. They were bankrupt. Less than 20 years later, here they come again, and like to took over half the world. If we hadn't have got involved in it, they would have. Them and Japan together. We was just sitting here, minding our own business. Done made up our mind we wasn't going to get involved until Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Why in the world would they do that?
They want to take us over too.
Why would they want us to get involved in a war?
To keep us beat down, so we have to ask for more funds so that they can keep getting richer and richer off of us. It's a money game.
Well, that's how Babylon controls the world. About the time everybody starts getting out from under them, they start a war. What have we gained out of any of these wars? Nothing. A lot of young men killed. We're in debt. Germany came back, like they took over the world. Well, could this be one of the heads of the beast that was killed and he came back to life? Are we further along in the book of Revelations than we realize we are?
Oh, yeah.
In Revelation 17:11, it said the beast is the 8th ruler, but he is of the 7th. So if the head that was killed and came back to life was the 7th, and now it's the beast itself, then all those countries are bound up in that beast right now. And it's not just one country, it's a lot of countries that Babylon's controlling through financing. In 1945, which is just, I think, I didn't look this up, I think a year after World War II ended. Didn't it end in 44?
45.
45? Well, okay. In 1945, right after the war, the United Nations was established.
Yeah.
The beginning of a one world government. It's still in effect, and it's headquartered in New York City.
Yes, it is.
Babylon, the financial system, is really behind the wars. They're the ones behind, they're financing both sides. And every time we get in a war, we get further in debt. And every time a certain party gets in control of the government, they give away so much money they have to raise the taxes. Well, they're just printing the money. And our taxes go to Babylon to pay the debt back. It's just a vicious cycle. You never get out of debt. There's no way this country will ever be out of debt. It owes too much money. There's not that much money here. All the countries that have gone to war owes them money. And they got to do what they tell them to. And notice the politicians and the dictators around the world that are running countries where the people that are making the money and doing the work are the lowest paid ones in the country, and the leaders are living in mansions, flying around in jets. Who is really making the money? Babylon's bought them off. Can you see Babylon?
Oh, yeah.
Can you see the beast? Am I explaining it? I mean, I've read this so much, it's clear to me, but it's hard to explain. The countries are in bondage to Babylon. What's going to happen when the people wake up and realize what's been going on all this time? They've been deceived, not just back to the Civil War. This goes all the way back to Jesus' day. And it's not just the nations, it's the church, the church, the religious system. The devil had took over the temple in Jesus' day. They were buying and selling in the temple. We figured out in Sunday school, he wound up running them money changers out of the temple 3 times. And what happened? They come right back. What happened when they crucified him? They run got their table. Come right back. So, no one country ever really wins a war. Now we say we won World War II, and we did. Whipped the Germans. Bombed Berlin to rubble. But the United States is so far in debt. And the other countries are so far in debt. Who really won the war? Babylon. When the people finally realize what's been going on all this time, when the American people get enough of what's going on in this country, they're going to clean the government out of the Babylon system. Somebody's still going to have to run the government. But Babylon is going to fall. And that is part of God's plan. Let me read a couple more scriptures. We've already read them, but I want to back this up. In 17:15, and he saith unto me, the waters which I saw, which the horse sitteth, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate. Well, the 10 horns are 10 kings that are given power for a little while. Well, that's nations. Nations are going to realize what's been going on all this time, and they're going to take Babylon down. They shall make her desolate and naked, shall eat her flesh, burn her with fire. Sound like she's going to be destroyed. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. It's all part of God's plan, leading up to the end of this age. When Babylon falls, it's going to create a void. Babylon's been running the world all this time. And when it collapses, it's going to get rough, no doubt. And somebody is going to have to step in and take over, or the whole world will collapse, starve to death. Brother Don's got a big garden, but he ain't got enough for all of us. We're either going to have to learn how to grow our own stuff, or somebody's going to have to step in. All the merchants are bankrupt. They got nothing to sell. You've been in Walmart and went in there hunting something and it ain't there no more.
Well, they moved it.
Yeah.
Can't find it.
We're just beginning to see the start of it. It'll create a void that the nations themselves will have to fill. And it'll bring us closer to the end of this age. The kings and the nations of this earth will have to band together, giving their power, remember, and they'll agree and give their kingdom to the beast. Well, the beast I'm looking at is the United Nations. It's already set up. All these nations banding together. Well, what if we just give all our power to the United Nations, which is what Obama tried to do? What Biden will do. And he's just a puppet. What if we just sign over and say, well, whatever you decide to do. And they come down here to Shelbyville and say, well, you don't have to shut that building down. We need that building for something. What are we going to do? We're going to sign up with them?
No.
I'm not. Brother Don's not. I'm speaking for him out of turn. If I'm wrong, correct me. The nations will give their power to the beast. And somewhere in this timeline, somewhere in this story, the rapture's going to take place. Because the Antichrist is going to come out, be out full force. Right now, in other countries, unless you do what they tell you to do, you can't go in a grocery store, you can't go in a bar. And it's not just the shot, it's other things. It's already started. You remember in Revelation it said one way the mark of the beast, you won't be able to buy or sell. But if you can't buy or sell, how are you going to survive in our Walmart generation? It's going to be hard. But remember something else. Let me just read this real quick right here. Here's the patience. This is in chapter 14, part of the outline. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Write, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. This is between the time Babylon falls and the rapture. Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. We're living in a time when we can stand up like the old prophets of old. And if we do, we're going to be blessed. It's right there. I didn't make that up. If you go to the Old Testament, there's a lot about Babylon. Isaiah, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Ezra, Nehemiah, Jeremiah, Obadiah, a lot of the prophets lived during the time, either before, right before the time, during the time, or right after the time that Babylon took Israel into captivity. And a lot of the prophecies that were prophesied back then are in Revelation about our day too.
Yeah.
Same thing. God don't change. He works the same way. Maybe we'll get into some of that.